Morning, everybody. So in this presentation, I'll explain how P2P fits into the wider program of upgrades that are happening on the Auckland Metro network. I'll talk in more detail about Papakura Pukekohe, or P2P as we call it. So talk about the benefits, what we need to build, how we might build it, some of the timeframes, and then I'll hand back to Tammy. We'll then go through questions and answers. So P2P is just one of several very large projects being undertaken on the rail network. I'm sure everybody's heard of City Rail Link in the city, a massive project. On top of that, we've got Wirredi Key Park, which is significant improvements around Wirredi and Key Park, also being done by Kiwi Rail. And then on top of that, we've got Support and Growth Alliance and their proposal to build 3 new stations between Papakura and Pukekohe as well. But stay on, as Tammy said, stay online because they follow this presentation and talk about those stations. All of these together will modernise the network to meet the region's growing demands, enable more freight to move by rail, ease congestion on the busiest parts of the network, make the network more resilient and easier to maintain, and improve community services. The P2P project team are working very closely with all of these other projects to minimise disruption as much as we can and also manage resources. So I'm here today to talk to you about one of those projects, which is P2P. I'll talk a bit later on about the infrastructure in P2P, but before I do that, I'll just outline some of the benefits. So at the moment, there are 2 trains an hour from Papakura to Pukekohe using the old diesel fleet, which are 2-car trains, and you have to change trains at Papakura if you're going to and from the city. In 3 years' time, a full CRL opens. P2P electrification will enable 6 trains per hour using the new electric trains, and you won't have to change at Papakura. P2P, together with the new stations being delivered by the Support and Growth Alliance, will allow for significant development that is already occurring in the area. The new trains and stations and track upgrades will also provide a much more reliable service. So what do we need to build to deliver these benefits? So the first thing is obviously the electrification infrastructure, and you can see a typical picture there of the masts and the wires that we need to install between Papakura and Pukekohe. These are pretty much exactly the same as the other masts and structures that you've already seen in other parts of the network going into the city. The masts roughly 50 to 40 metres apart along the route, and you can see the wires there and the other infrastructure as well. So on top of the wiring, we have to put in new signalling to improve safety and ensure that the signalling is compatible with the overhead power system. Signalling is just systems that manage where and when trains go, like lights and wires and stuff like that. On top of that, we're doing new upgrading level crossings. I think there's 5 upgrades along the route, make the level crossings safer. And track changes will include layout improvements in key areas, essentially that enable trains to run on different tracks at different times, which gives much more flexibility to train movements and also improves reliability. Lastly, Kiwi Rail is working closely with Auckland Transport to support the redevelopment around Pukekohe Station. So let's talk a bit about the stations. As I've said, Support and Growth Alliance is currently planning 3 new stations between Papakura and Pukekohe. The Support and Growth Alliance will talk in a lot more detail about this at the end of this project. P2P's job in relation to those stations is to work really closely with Support and Growth Alliance and key stakeholders to ensure that as far as we can, we enable the new stations, but we're not responsible for building them. We are responsible for upgrading the Pukekohe station. Introducing new electric trains at Pukekohe will result in more services and longer trains. So to ready Pukekohe Station, Kiwi Rail is working closely with Auckland Transport to build a modern public transport interchange. The redevelopment of the station area means that passenger facilities design will complement the bus interchange and be in line with Auckland Metro's rail standards. And this is a schematic of Pukekohe station. So if you just orientate yourselves, on the right hand side is going towards the city and the left hand side is going towards Hamilton. So works at Pukekohe station includes improved passenger facilities. New platform setup will enable more and longer trains to stop. Initially, platforms will serve 6-car trains, and then we're future-proofing those platforms to enable them to extend to 9-car trains in the future. New overhead power masts and changes in track layout will allow freight and passenger trains to pass easily and safely through the station area without getting in the way of each other. We're also doing new stabling for electric trains and rail and staff facilities for Auckland's transport operational and maintenance staff, so they can actually operate out of Pukekohe. The space at the station is very limited, so that means that the old Pukekohe station building will need to be rehomed, I should say. Tammy, do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Sure, thanks, Doug. With the changes that are happening at the train station, with the narrowing of the platforms and having more tracks, it means that the old Pukekohe station building, there's unfortunately just not enough room for it to stay where it is. So we've been talking with the local community groups to find out what's going to be possible in terms of rehoming it. And we've got a meeting next week with them to talk a bit more about it, because it needs to be taken off-site by the end of this year, I think. By November, so we can start undertaking the redevelopment work at the station itself in advance of the electric trains coming to Pukekohe.
Okay, so those of you familiar with Pukekohe station will also be familiar with the V8 bridge. We have to remove that as well to allow for electrification. Okay, so this is more about how we're going to build it. Very challenging project. One of the key drivers is to make sure that we keep everybody safe while we build it. We've already started, so work is underway and it's going to be rolled out in phases. In August last year, KiwiRail engaged E-Tracks, which is a joint venture between John Holland and McConnell Dow, and they are working with Siemens and KiwiRail to deliver the project. Those contractors will compete as much work as possible while trains are running, but as I said, every now and then, to deliver the safety, we actually have to shut the railway to do key work and really significant work. So the works involve the work we've started already is enabling work, so we're essentially putting in access tracks, we're doing utility diversions, we're actually building some of the new signalling, ducting and trenching that we need to critically signal the new works. Also just clearing the vegetation, so we started that back in October last year, and that will continue through to the middle of this year, when we hope to sign the main contract. The main contract works includes all the significant track work, including rebuilding the formation or the pavement underneath the tracks, installing the overhead mast foundations and structures, and then completing the signalling as well. And then finally, once it's all up and running, we need to commission it and connect it to the main rail network. And part of that will include running a public safety campaign to make sure everybody's aware of keeping away from the high-powered electric lines. As we build it, we'll keep in touch with our neighbours as much as we can, so that you'll be aware of when we're doing stuff in your area, and in particular we'll keep everybody informed about changes or disruptions to the metro rail service at the moment. Where we do shut down the railway, we will be providing replacement bus services between Papakura and Pukekohe. So this is just more about that. Auckland Transport actually runs the trains on the network. The passenger trains, not Kiwi Rail. So we work very closely with them to work out when we can actually shut the railway and do the main works. Usually it's at off-peak times like evenings and weekends, but we also take advantage of long weekends and holidays. For example, Christmas, New Year, where we do a lot of work, and shut the railway down and get a lot of work done and get it done safely. So these are a few key dates. In January last year, 2020, we actually received funding from NZ Upgrade Program. Middle of 2020, well, in fact, August it was, E-Tracks, the joint venture contractors, were engaged. Design work then commenced using Jacobs, and as I said, also the enabling works, and also they're preparing for consent applications. Pam, are you online? Can you talk a bit more about that?
Certainly, Doug. Kia ora, everyone. My name's Pam Butler. I'm a senior planner with Kiwi Rail. As Doug's noted, the project largely consists of core railway works inside the railway corridor. The resource consents for these works are generally non-notified and would be processed by Auckland Council, but we are using another method. At a district level, we'll lodge an outline plan of works at the Auckland Council. However, all the other consents, such as the regional consents, will be lodged with the EPA under the COVID-19 Recovery Fast Track Consenting Act of 2020. P2P is a listed project under that legislation, and the legislation provides a fast track processing regime, especially for post-COVID recovery. We have to do all the same work preparing the resource consents, but the Act provides for faster time-bound processing, which will enable us to get on and employ people and start the main works as soon as possible. As Doug's noted, the Phase 1 works, which was a tranche of permitted enabling works, started in late 2020, following the approval of an outline plan waiver from Auckland Council, and we also got an archaeological authority for the known archaeological sites, which were mainly at or near existing and former stations alongside the route. We plan to commence the Phase 2, which is the main works, which are in mid-2021. And this phase will be subject to 2 different planning application packages to be lodged with the EPA. The first one we're hoping to lodge in early March. So package 1 includes mainly the track works and bulk earthworks across the entire project footprint. And this is probably the largest component of the package 1 works. We've got a couple of temporary access tracks that are located within stormwater management areas. We have to obtain consent for the disturbance of some contaminated material, mainly around Pukekohe station. The use of a Mercer Road site as a construction yard. And we'll be needing to tidy up the corridor and removing vegetation from riparian areas of around 34 waterways, and the removal of vegetation and some earthworks within wetland locations along the route. So as can be expected, some of these areas are very sensitive, such as the waterways and potential archaeological sites, and we're engaging with iwi on an ongoing basis. All the consents that I've mentioned typically require that the works be done under detailed management plans, such as erosion and sediment control, construction noise management, and traffic management, and we will be preparing those, and the Auckland Council will sign off those plans. We're very interested in any comments and feedback you might have about any particular issues to do with these works, which you feel might impact on you, particularly if you're living next to the corridor. All line side owners and occupiers have been notified about this event, and you will be contacted again by the EPA. Our second package of works will come much later, and that is to do with the improvement of culverts along the route and any additional land requirements. And we're still refining those designs, so we will keep working on that, and package 2 will be prepared in some months. Thanks so much to all those Lineside neighbours for attending online, and I know we would much rather have been there in person, so please send in any questions and thoughts using the chat function. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, Pam. So this is the last slide, I think. So just to recap, works are underway, but the main construction works will start middle of this year. So thanks very much, everybody. I'll hand back to Tammy, who can moderate the questions and answers.